Good afternoon. My name is Mike Tyndall, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today for a presentation on connecting the Q Braille with the Mac, both using USB and Bluetooth with voiceover. Before we begin, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Q Braille and kind of what it does and how it's different from any other Braille display that is on the market today. If we think about the Q Braille, we call it Q Braille because it literally is a QWERTY keyboard. But rather than having a QWERTY keyboard for all of our letters, we have removed that keyboard and we've replaced it with a Perkins style Braille keyboard. So what does that do? It gives us things like the modifier keys that we're used to. So I'll give an example using Windows. If we want to close a program on a keyboard, QWERTY keyboard, how do we do it? We press Alt F4. Or if we want to select all, we do Control A. Copy is Control C, paste is Control V, save is Control S. Those kind of keyboard commands that we use all the time. We can do things like Shift F10 to get our application's context menu if there's not one available on our keyboard. So those are Windows commands that when we're using a screen reader, a lot of them are commands that we use every day. And oftentimes if people are using a Braille display, rather than having to memorize the commands that they use to drive their specific Braille display and their screen reader using Windows, it's often easier to just reach up on the keyboard and perform the commands that we need to perform. So when you're using the Q Braille, we alleviate that need to reach up to the keyboard because all the commands that we need are right there on the keyboard that we're using of our Braille display. So I'm quickly going to talk about the Braille display a little bit just to give you a kind of a quick overview of it, and then we're going to dive in and show how to connect it both with a USB connection and a Bluetooth connection using VoiceOver on the Mac. So on the very front of the device, on the top of the device, we have a 40-cell Braille display with 40 cursor router buttons. Above that, we have on the bottom row all the keys that you would find on a bottom row of a standard QWERTY keyboard. So on a computer, on a PC, that would be Control, Function, Windows, Alt, Space, Alt, Applications key, Control, followed by your up, down, left, and right arrow keys. Actually, it's left arrow, moving to the right, up and down arrow, moving to the right, right arrow. On the very top row of the keyboard, moving from left to right, we have Escape. And then we have F1 through F12. And between Escape and F1 is a space. Between F4 and F5 is a space. Between F8 and F9 is a space. And then following F12, we have a six-pack of keys, which we'll talk about in 1 second. On F4, F8, and F12, we also have a line, raised line at the top of the key, marking it so that you quickly can find F4, F8, and F12, depending on what you're wanting to do. On the right-hand side, beyond F12, we have a six-pack, and we're going to go over these keys in columns. We have the first column after F12, we have Insert. Moving straight down is Home. Below Home is End. If we move back up to the Insert key and we move one key to the right, which is the most right key on the top row of the keyboard, we have Delete, followed by Page Up, followed by Page Down. And on the Braille display portion of the Q Braille, we do have on either end of the Q Braille, we have scroll up and scroll down for your Braille keys. So when we use the Q Braille, a couple ways that it can be used is as a traditional Braille display, or we can use it as most of us do, using it as what we call the Q Braille. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. So if we move back up to the Escape key, below it is a key with a raised line that is the pair key. Below that, we have the mode key. And that is all of the keys on the Q Braille. On the left-hand side of the device is a power button. I'm going to press the power button now, hold it in for about 2 seconds, and you will hear my Braille display power up. So you heard it play a power up sound, and I have my unit set to start at the main menu when I power the device on. And I am currently set at an application that we use on the Q Braille called Notepad. And if you have an SD card in the device, you can actually take notes, and those files can be saved using the Notepad feature. But I'm now going to go into options, and I'm going to make a few changes that I want to change before we dive into connecting. And this is all going to be about Braille and about the layout of my keyboard. So I'm going to press space with O, or as we call it, O chord. Anytime you hear me say the word chord, that means space with a letter or a dot combination. So I'm going to press space O, or O chord, to go into the options menu. And I see 8-dot mode is currently off by default. I'm going to use my down arrow key, and I'm looking for Braille grade for messages. And that simply means when I'm looking at my Q Braille and it's presenting me with options, how do I want to read that Braille, in what mode? My options by default is set to computer Braille. I'm going to press space, and I will change that. The next thing I see is US uncontracted Braille, space again, to US contracted Braille, space again, UEB uncontracted. I'm going to press space one more time, and I see UEB contracted Braille, which is what I want. But I'm reading that in uncontracted Braille because we have not saved our options yet. I'm going to down arrow again, and I see Braille table US English. I'm going to press space twice until I come to UEB. I have UEB. So I'm now going to down arrow again, and I see message display time. We're going to leave that alone. Down arrow until I see Braille grade for entry, and that is important. It's set now to UEB. I could change it to US if I press, actually I can't change it to US because US would be in my table above that we just changed. But it is currently set to UEB contracted Braille, which is what I want. So the next thing that I want to change is my keyboard layout. Right now it is set to a Microsoft keyboard, but we also have the ability to change it to an Apple keyboard. So I'm going to press the letter L. That's the command to get to keyboard layout. I now see keyboard layout Microsoft, and I'm going to change that by pressing space to Apple. And now I'm going to press enter, and all these changes that I have made in my options menu concerning Braille will now be saved. I'm going to press enter. Everything is now saved, and I see options on my Braille display. That went away, and now I'm at Notepad, which is the top option of my menu on the device. A couple things I want to talk about before we dive in, and one of them is called hybrid mode. Oftentimes when we think about hybrid mode, and I've tried thinking of numerous ways to explain this to make it make sense to all of you, and if you find it confusing, give us a call. We're happy to talk with you, answer your questions about hybrid mode and how it works. It's a little bit challenging, but I'm going to try my best to explain it to you in a way that it is not complicated after you listen to this presentation. So when we think about hybrid mode, I often think about hybrid mode as something like driving a car. And for those of us who are blind, we typically don't drive cars, at least not yet anyway, maybe someday. But hybrid mode is like a gasoline-powered engine and an electric engine kind of all merged together. And when I think of hybrid mode, I think of a Perkins-style keyboard and a QWERTY keyboard merged together. When we turn off hybrid mode on the QBraille, the way that we toggle it on and off is by pressing the mode key, which is if you find escape on the top row of your keyboard, top left key, move down 2 keys and you're at the mode button. A descending tone means that hybrid mode is turned off. And when hybrid mode is turned off, the computer or the Mac or iOS, whatever screen reader that you're using at that point, we're using all the traditional Braille keys that we typically would use to drive that screen reader when we use the Braille Edge Braille display. When hybrid mode is turned on, the QBraille is now in total control. So things like Alt F4, Windows D for the desktop, Control S to save something. These are all Windows commands. We're going to talk about Mac in a minute. All of those commands will now work because we are using hybrid mode turned on our QBraille. So I am now going to go into the connectivity menu by pressing the letter C. And I see connection USB, which is what I want. VoiceOver on my Mac is currently turned on, and I'm using a modern MacBook Pro, and it has 4 USB-C ports on it. So I am using a USB-C to USB-A adapter, and I have a USB-C cable plugged into my I have a USB-C to USB-A cable plugged into the USB-A to USB-C adapter that I have for my Mac. Now you may ask the question, if I have my newer Mac and it has a USB-C to USB-C cable, can I use that cable? The answer is no. You must have a USB-C to USB-A adapter if you have a newer Mac. If you have an older Mac and it's using a standard USB-A port on it, you can plug your USB-A to USB-C cable directly into your computer and it will work. But in my case, I am using an adapter. It's a very short cable that you can basically buy at any computer store, Best Buy, Office Depot, the like. So I see on my Braille display connection USB, and that's what I want for now. I'm going to press enter on the QBraille. And I now see terminal mode UEB contracted Braille, which is exactly what I want to see. And I am now going to press the mode button on my Braille display. And you heard doo-doom, and that means hybrid mode is now turned off. I want hybrid mode turned on, so I'm going to press the mode key again. And you heard that descending or ascending tone. And on my display, it says USB hybrid mode on, UEB contracted Braille. So I'm now going to simply plug in the USB-C cable to my QBraille on the right-hand side. And I am now going to unmute speech.
Voiceover unmuted.
I did that on my Mac. And I now want to go to my dock. So the command when I'm using VoiceOver,
You are currently on a separator. To open this item, press Control, Option, Space.
I can either use my VoiceOver keys, which are Command Option, or I can use the caps lock key. I like using the caps lock key simply because it's a little easier. So on the keyboard itself, just beyond the control key, if we're looking at this from a Windows keyboard perspective, I'm using that because most people are most familiar with a Windows keyboard. We would have the control key. Just to the left of that and a little bit higher is Shift, Caps Lock, and Tab. But now that I have changed this to a Mac keyboard or an Apple keyboard, the bottom row keys have changed, and they are now Function, Control, Option, and Command. So I'm going to press voiceover key and the letter D to go to my dock.
Dock. Zoom.us. Open 23 of 29.
And I heard Zoom is open. And I am going to do VO left arrow.
System preferences 22 of 29.
And I see system preferences if I go left again.
App Store 21 of 29.
I see my App Store. Now I quickly want to go to my Notes app.
Notes 8 of 29.
So I simply pressed the letter N followed by space, and that took me directly to my Notes app. Now that is one way.
You are currently on application dock item. To open this application, press
that I'm able to move around. But in
Downloads 28 of 29.
An easier way
Notes 8 of 29.
to move around is if I press Mode and Escape. That will toggle me from UEB Braille to computer.
You are currently on application dock item. To open this application.
So that means that if I quickly press buttons on my device, first letter navigation now will work on my dock. But I want to go back into UEB Braille because I'm going to open Notes by pressing Caps Lock and space on my Q Braille, and that will open my Notes app. I could also press a cursor router button if I wanted to click on it.
Zoom.us. System. Notes. Notes. Window. Folders. Table. Notes. 12. Row 2 of 3.
However, if I press VO keys, which are Option and Control space, that command does not work. However, Caps Lock space does. I want to now go to my toolbar. So I'm going to do Caps Lock right arrow.
Vertical splitter.
And I hear vertical splitter. So I'm going to do VO left.
Folders. Table. Note. Toolbar.
And I see that I'm on my toolbar. I want to interact with my toolbar by pressing Command. I'm sorry, not Command, but voiceover Shift.
You are currently on a toolbar. To interact with the items on this tool.
Voiceover Shift down arrow.
In toolbar. 13 items. View mode. Radio group.
And I want to find new note. So I'm going to do VO right arrow, or in my case, Caps Lock right arrow. They both work to get to new note.
Folders button. Attachments. Top delete button. New note button.
Caps Lock space to activate it.
Edit text.
And I am now inside of a note. So I can simply type in contracted UEB Braille.
Today. Space. A.
I see today is a nice
day. Space.
I wrote today is a nice day outside. So I now want to stop using my
You are currently
app.
on a text area.
So I'm going to simply close my Notes app, and the note will be saved by pressing Command Q.
Zoom.us. System dialog. Mute button.
And I am now back in my Zoom app, and I want to go back to my dock. So the command for my dock is Command.
You are currently on the button. To click this button.
The command for my dock, is voiceover D.
Dock. Notes 8 of 29.
And it's keeping me on Notes because that's the last dock item that I was sitting on. So I'm now going to unplug my...
You are currently on application dock item. To open this app.
I'm now going to unplug my USB cable. You heard VoiceOver make a little noise because VoiceOver now has stopped sharing, stopped using the Braille display simply because I disconnected it. I also want to mention that when you're using a Mac with a Braille display, there are no need to install any drivers. You can simply plug it into the Mac and it just works. We are going to be doing another webinar in the future about using a Braille display with the Mac, and in that video I plan to cover some traditional Braille display commands as well as the Braille display commands for the Q Braille. But what I certainly recommend when using the Q Braille is that you use it using the standard voiceover keyboard commands that you know when you're using a Mac. If you're using an iPhone, really you just need to pair the Braille display and not worry about pairing the keyboard when you're using it with your iPhone, because then it will use the traditional Braille displays that we all know and all the commands that we know when using iOS. Now, some of you may have just said in your mind, pair the Braille display as opposed to the keyboard, do what? And yes, I'm going to explain that to you now. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the escape key. Just below the escape key is the pair button. The pair button is used to establish pairing different devices. So if I were to press pair and the escape key, that is my USB connection, which is the current connection that I'm in now in terminal mode. But I am able to connect up to 6 different devices to my Q Braille via Bluetooth. They can be things like a PC, a Mac, an Android phone, an iPhone, maybe multiple iPhones or iPads. And so we give you 6 choices, 6 things that you can connect. And the way that you move between those 6 items is by pressing pair and then F1 through F6 to choose the connection that you want. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, so stay with me. Let me say that once you set this up for the first time, it is not difficult, and once you have it set up, it's very easy to use from this point on once you set it up. Whether you're connecting a PC or a Mac, you have to establish 2 physical Bluetooth connections. And these Bluetooth connections work independently of each other when hybrid mode is turned off. When hybrid mode is turned on, just as you saw with my USB connections, the 2 connections of the Braille display and the keyboard work together. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my Bluetooth keyboard to my Mac. And I'm going to map it to key F7. So what I have is 1 through F6. F1 through F6 is my Braille display connection. F7 through F12 are my keyboard connection. And they work together, F1 and F7, F2 and F8, and so on all the way up to F6 and F12. That would be together. So I want to connect a Bluetooth keyboard. And the Q Braille is seen as a standard keyboard when I connect it. So I am simply going to press pair and F7. Remember that pair is the key below escape. And on my device, I now see, and this is important, pairing mode Q Braille XL, followed by the serial number of my device. Because Q Braille is the name of the keyboard the Bluetooth name for the keyboard that I'm going to select. When I go in a moment to pair my Braille display side, it will be called Braille Edge, not to confuse them. QBraille is the keyboard, Braille Edge is the Braille display connections. So since I see pairing mode QBraille, I am now going to open System Preferences by pressing, actually I'm not, I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do VOM twice.
Menu bar. Menu extras. Zoom.us. Menu extra.
And I'm going to VO right arrow to find Bluetooth.
Bluetooth. Menu extra.
I'm going to do VO space to select it.
Bluetooth. Menu 7 items.
And I'm now going to do VO down arrow until I hear Open Bluetooth Preferences. You're going to hear a list of my other devices that are connected to the Mac.
You are currently in a menu. Mike Shields S's Mouse. Mike's AirPod. Open Bluetooth Preferences ellipsis.
I'm going to do VO space.
Press Open Bluetooth Preferences ellipsis. System Preferences. Bluetooth window. Toolbar.
And I want to go over to a table here, so I'm going to do VO right arrow.
Bluetooth icon image. Table. No selection.
Table, no selection. And in this table, we're going to find at the bottom, it's going to find my QBraille, which remember, this is the keyboard for my Braille display. So I'm doing this under Bluetooth because it is a keyboard. So VO down arrow, VO shift down arrow.
In table, no selection.
And I'm now going to do VO down arrow until I
Devices,
find
busy
QBraille.
Mike Shields S, Mike's AirPod, separator, row, QBraille XL00620, connect pair button.
And you heard it say, my QBraille.
QBraille XL006.
Connect pair button. That's what I want, so I will do VO space.
Press pair button. QBraille XL00620, connected.
And you heard it say that it is connected.
QBraille XL00620, connected, remove button.
So I am now going
QBraille XL00620.
Press Command Q and close System Preferences.
Zoom.us, system.
We're now back in my Zoom app. And the next thing I want to do is I want to open VoiceOver Utility. And the easiest way that I can do that is by pressing VO F8. So if you're using a newer Mac with a touch bar, you would hold down VO function, which is the most 3 left keys on the bottom row of your Mac, and find F8 on the touch bar.
F9 key button.
I'm going to flick left.
F8 key button.
And I'm going to do a double tap.
Opening VoiceOver Utility. VoiceOver Utility window, utility categories.
Now, of course, if you're using a standard Mac, you would just press VO and your F8 key, and that will open VoiceOver Utilities. I want to go choose Braille in my options. So I'm going to find my table. I'm going to do VO right arrow.
Speak the following greeting after welcome to Mac OS. Display welcome dialog. Keys to use as the voiceover modifier. Control option or caps lock.
I've actually gone too far, so I'm going to do VO left.
Keys to use. Display welcome to Mac. Speak the following greeting. Utility categories. Table.
Utility
general.
Categories table. I'm on my general option, but I want Braille.
Selected.
So I'm going to do VO shift down arrow.
In utility category.
And I will VO down arrow to find Braille.
Verbosity, speak, navigation, web, sound, visuals, commanders, Braille.
I found it. So I'm going to do VO shift up arrow.
Out of utility category.
And I am now in my Braille category. And there are 3 tabs here. We have a layout tab.
Layout, selected.
We have a status tab, and I'm VO right arrowing.
Status tab.
And the next one is a displays tab.
Displays tab, 3 of 3.
I'm going to do VO space.
Selected, displays tab.
I have now selected my displays tab, and this is where we go to enable VoiceOver on the Mac. So I'm going to do my mode key followed by F1 on the QBraille, and that will actually show me my Braille Edge. So I now see pairing mode braille edge, which is exactly what I want to see. So I am now going to do VO right.
Braille displays, empty table.
And we see that it's empty. So I want to do VO right until I find the add button.
No display detected. Attach a USB braille display or click add to set up a Bluetooth braille display. Add button.
There's my add button. I'll do VO space.
Select Bluetooth device. Select your braille display from the list of devices. If your braille display is not found, make sure it is in range of this computer, turned on, and discoverable.
So I now will do VO left and go back to my table.
Select your braille display from the list of select Bluetooth device. Bluetooth logo image. Select Bluetooth device. Select your braille display from the list of table, no selection.
Table, no selection. That's where I want to be. VO shift down arrow.
In table, no selection. Devices, busy progress indicator, row 1 of 5.
I will now do VO down arrow.
Devices, row 1 of 5 cell. QBraille XL00620, connected, remove.
Now remember, that can be confusing. That said QBraille, that is talking about
QBraille XL006.
That is talking about the keyboard, not the braille display. We're looking for braille edge.
QBraille XL00
down arrow.
Mike Shields S's mouse, Mike's AirPods, Mike's AirPod Pro, not separator, row 6 of 7. Braille EDGE00620, connect pair button.
I hear braille edge connect pair button. So I will
Braille EDGE0.
I will do VO space.
Press pair button. Braille EDGE00620, connected.
So I'm now going to
Braille
stop,
EDGE0.
I'm now going to stop interacting by doing VO up arrow.
Braille EDGE0.
VO shift up arrow.
Out of table. Cancel button. Table. Braille EDGE006. Braille EDGE00.
And I'm now going to do VO
Braille
right
EDGE00.
arrow twice.
Cancel button. Select default button.
And I have a select button. I'm going to do VO space to select it.
Table. Braille EDGE00. Help button. Closing dialog.
And you now heard my USB sound, and you also heard or connection sound. You also heard my
You are currently on the button. To click this button,
device go through with voiceover to show you that it connected to voiceover. And on my QBraille now connected Bluetooth with no wires. I'm kind of waving it around. It is connected with 0 wires. I want to make sure that my hybrid mode though is turned on. So I'm going to hold it up to the microphone here. I'm going to press the mode key. And now hybrid mode is turned on. So if I do Command D, I'm sorry, not Command D, voiceover D, or in my case, caps lock D.
leaving voiceover utility. Enter in toolbar. Search text field, blank. Now in tab announcements. Now in tab voiceover utility. Utility categories, table, verbosity, selected.
I need to close, sorry, I need to close out of my voiceover utility. So I'm going to
You are currently on a table. To enter this table,
Command Q.
Zoom.us, system dialog, mute button.
And now I'll do voiceover D.
Doc. Notes, 8 of 29.
And I am now back inside of my dock. And if you heard it say notes, so I could do.
You are currently on application doc item. To open this application,
VO, or my caps lock key in my case, caps lock space.
Zoom.us, system, notes, window, folders, table, notes, 13, row 2 of 3, selected has keyboard focus.
And if I do VO right arrow.
Vertical splitter, my notes table, today, vertical splitter. April 24th, 2020 at 3:07 p.m. Edit text insertion at beginning of text. Title, today is a nice day outside.
I'm going to go to the bottom of this note by cursor routing. And I'm going to say I will, W space,
will,
go, out, and play.
Period, space.
So I'm now still here in my note. And I can now do Command Q.
You are currently on a text area.
To leave my notes.
Zoom.us, system dialog, mute button.
So I am now back in Zoom. And since I am here, I will tell you that the command to stop my recording.
You are currently on the button. To click this button, press.
In a moment, you will hear me do. is Command Shift R. So I can simply press Command Shift R in a second and stop the recording. I hope this has not been too lengthy. I've tried my best to make it so that you can kind of understand what we're doing here. And I will say to you that if you do have questions, feel free to give us a call. If you own a Q Braille and you have questions, feel free to call our technical support department. Their phone number is 888-520-4467. You can also send an email to support@hims-inc.com. That's support@hims, HIMS-INC.com. If you have sales questions, feel free to also call us at 888-520-4467. Choose the sales line, and we will be happy to talk to you about purchasing a Q Braille. Or you could email us to info@hims-inc.com. Again, that's info@HIMS-INC.com. So for now, I am going to say thank you so much for joining us today on this presentation. And I am going to press Command Shift R to end my recording and say again, thanks to all of you for being here.